Welcome to Night Stories from VHS Era. You've arrived at a place where the glow of old television screens, the hum of rewinding tapes, and the softness of forgotten childhood dreams come alive once more. Each night will take a quiet journey back in time to sleepy suburbs, moonlit driveways, warm summer breezes, and the kind of memories that feel just a little too magical to be real. Here you don't need to worry. Just press play and let the night unfold. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a moment to slow down. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it gently. And now, exhale slowly through your mouth. Let the day melt away with that breath. Again, breathe in deeply. Feel your shoulders soften. Now, release and let go of everything you don't need to carry right now. Imagine you're lying on a cozy bed in your childhood room. Outside, the wind hums softly. The light from a small lamp glows like a warm memory, and the sound of a distant VHS tape spinning fills the air with comfort. You are safe. You are still. And the night is yours. Let's begin tonight's story.
Let me ask you something. Do you remember the thrill of walking into a small neighborhood video store, heart pounding with excitement, eyes scanning the walls for that one magical movie that just felt like home? Do you remember the smell of plastic VHS cases, the hum of fluorescent lights above, and that soft static of an old box fan running somewhere in the back of the store? I do. And tonight, I want to take you back there with me. Back to the night that started it all. Stay with me until the end of this video to find out how one simple Friday night transformed into a sacred childhood ritual, a comfort I would chase every weekend for years. By the end of this story, you'll understand why I waited all week just to relive the same story over and over again, and how that ritual helped shape the kid I was into the person I became. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's rewind back to the early 90s. It was a chilly Friday evening, sometime in October. I was 9. The kind of night where the wind outside made the windows creak just slightly, and the warm, yellow light of our living room felt like the coziest place in the entire universe. I just finished my last spoon of Kraft mac and cheese, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, and my mom had just slipped on her blue windbreaker, the one with the pink and teal stripes that always rustled when she moved. She looked down at me with a smile and said something that made my entire week light up. "Wanna go pick a movie?" Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just picking a movie. This was a portal, a time machine, a spaceship, and the launch pad? Our local video rental store, Sunset Video, tucked between a laundromat and a bakery on Elmwood Street. You know the type, faded awning, handwritten signs taped to the glass windows, and that big red open sign that buzzed faintly when you stood too close. Have you ever felt that flutter in your chest when you knew something special was about to happen, but you couldn't quite put your finger on why? That's exactly how I felt as we pulled into the tiny parking lot. The street lamps above buzzed to life. I still remember the sound of gravel under our tires. And the second I stepped inside, the warm air hit my face, that perfect mix of plastic, popcorn, and cardboard. I can almost still smell it if I try hard enough. There were posters everywhere. Jurassic Park, The Sandlot. Some of them hung slightly crooked, curling at the edges. I wandered between shelves taller than I was, eyes wide, hands trailing along the tapes like I was choosing treasure. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, not yet, but something was calling to me. And then I saw it. The cover was pure magic, bold letters in fiery gold, a splash of purple clouds behind a flying bicycle silhouette, a story about a boy, an alien, and a bond that felt deeper than most friendships I'd had at school. It was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Yes, that movie. I know it's iconic now, but for me back then it was brand new. A mystery, a doorway. Have you ever picked something by instinct and later realized it was destiny? That's how I felt as I clutched that clunky black plastic case in my small hands, tracing the label with my finger. My mom gave me a knowing smile. "That one looks good," she said, like she could sense what was about to happen. And just like that, we checked it out, the lady behind the counter stamping the yellow rental card and sliding the tape into a red and white sunset video bag. On the way home, I held it on my lap like a sacred object. The car smelled faintly of French fries and winter coats. The radio played something soft, probably a song by Phil Collins or Bryan Adams, and I was already imagining the story inside that tape. What if it wasn't just a movie? What if it was a secret meant just for me? Have you ever watched something that made you forget you were sitting on a couch? That night, I didn't just watch E.T. I lived it. I curled up in my favorite blanket, the blue one with the faded Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and watched wide-eyed as the story unfolded. I laughed, I cried, I felt things I didn't know had names. And when the credits rolled, something inside me shifted. I looked at the tape, rewound it, and watched it again the next morning. And then again on Sunday, just before we returned it. But Monday came and I missed it. By Tuesday, I was replaying scenes in my head at school. By Thursday, I was dreaming about flying bicycles and glowing fingers. And by Friday, I was already begging to go back. Here's something I wonder now. Why did that movie feel so different from all the others? Why did I need to see it again so badly? The truth is, I think it gave me something I didn't know I was looking for. A sense of wonder. A story that made me feel like I mattered, like I was seen. It wasn't just about aliens or adventure. It was about connection. About finding something special in a world that sometimes felt too big, too fast, too loud. So that next Friday, guess what I did? I ran straight to the same shelf. But the tape was gone. Someone else had rented my movie. I remember standing there, stunned. Like someone had borrowed a piece of my heart without asking. I picked up another movie half-heartedly, but nothing compared. I waited an entire week to see that story again, and now I had to wait even longer. Have you ever lost something simple, but it felt like a big deal? That was the first time I realized how much a story could mean to someone. And that was the moment I made a decision. I would be faster next time. I would be early. Every Friday night, without fail, I would be back at Sunset Video the second the doors opened, just to make sure E.T. would be mine. That night started a tradition, a ritual, a countdown that began the moment the weekend ended. And from that point on, my week wasn't measured in days. It was measured in how many sleeps until I could rent my favorite movie again. Monday mornings were always the hardest. The sunlight coming in through the half-open blinds at school had a different color than it did on Saturday afternoons. It was colder, a little more tired. The desks in my classroom were aligned in perfect rows, each one slightly chipped at the corners from years of restless fingers. My seat was by the window, the third row from the back, and from there I could see the swings of the playground still moving from the breeze. But all I could think about was the movie. It had only been 2 days since I watched it, but it felt like forever. The images played again and again in my mind. That one moment where the main character jumps over the rooftop, the way the music swelled just before the final scene, the grainy texture of the VHS tape, how it fluttered for a second before correcting itself like a memory coming into focus. I would sit at my desk, pen in hand, pretending to take notes while doodling the main character's face in the margins of my notebook. Sometimes I'd draw the logo from the VHS cover, trying to get the bold colors just right with my limited set of Crayolas. Recess didn't help much. While the others ran outside to play kickball or trade pogs and stickers, I'd stay close to the benches, deep in my own little world. I imagined walking into the video store again, hearing the jingle of the bell above the door, the way the cool air hit my face, and that slight smell of plastic, cardboard, and old carpet that somehow always felt welcoming. I could even see Mr. Raymond, the owner, with his thick glasses and coffee-stained sweater, nodding at me like he knew exactly what I came for. He probably did. I had rented the movie 3 weeks in a row. Tuesday was the slowest day of them all. The excitement of Monday's memory had faded, but Saturday still felt too far away. During math class, I got in trouble for not paying attention. I was trying to remember a line from the film, mouthing the words quietly to myself until Mrs. Carmichael called my name, snapping me back into reality. I apologized, cheeks warm with embarrassment, and tried to refocus, but as soon as I looked down at the graph paper, my mind wandered again. That afternoon, while doing homework, I flipped through the TV guide and circled shows I didn't really care about. The truth was, no cartoon or special airing that week could compare. Even my old stack of Disney clamshells sat untouched on the shelf. I missed the thrill of sliding the tape into the visor, the satisfying click as it settled in, and that soft hum of the tape winding inside. I even missed the FBI warning screen. It was part of the ritual, and the ritual meant everything. By Wednesday, I had started a new drawing. This time, a full-page comic strip based on a made-up sequel to the movie. In my version, the characters went on a new adventure, and I got to decide where they went. I used to imagine that maybe, if I drew well enough, the people who made the movie might find my sketches and make it real. So yeah, but that's how it felt back then, like imagination had power. My friend Eli peeked over my shoulder during lunch and asked what I was drawing. I told him it was nothing. Some things felt too special to share. Thursday was better. The weekend was close enough to touch. I stopped by the corner store with my mom after school and saw the familiar display of penny candies and packs of bubble tape near the register. I begged for a pack, not because I wanted the gum, but because I liked chewing it during the opening credits of the movie. Another part of the ritual. That night, I opened my drawer and laid everything out. The gum, my comic strip, and even the little flashlight I used to sneak in extra movie time after lights out. It was all coming together. By Friday morning, my heart was already racing. The air outside had changed. It was softer, more forgiving, like it understood what the day meant. I counted the hours like treasures. Each subject passed like a checkpoint in a game, and every completed assignment was one step closer to the video store. I could almost feel the weight of the tape in my hand again, its warm plastic case and the sticker on the front with my own scribbled initials from the last time I borrowed it. That afternoon, walking home, I passed the small park near our house and saw some kids playing with their Walkmans clipped to their belt loops, headphones like halos around their heads. The sound of distant laughter mixed with the warm scent of grass and pavement reminded me of the closing scene of the film. Peaceful, slow, like the world taking a breath. I kicked a stone all the way down the sidewalk, pretending it was a piece of the story, something I could carry with me until the next showing. I didn't even care if someone else had rented it already. Just the idea of walking into the store, searching the shelf, holding my breath until I spotted that cover, it was enough to get me through the longest week. That's what it was like back then. Time wasn't measured in hours or school bells. It was counted in rewatchings and rewindings, in memories built on a looping tape that somehow never wore out, at least not in my mind. And as the sky turned golden and the shadows stretched across the sidewalks, I knew tomorrow would be worth the wait. Because Saturday meant more than just a movie. It meant a return to something familiar, something magical, something mine. The night before Saturday always had its own rhythm. There was something sacred about it. I'd lie awake in bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, replaying every frame of the movie in my head like a lullaby. It wasn't just excitement anymore. It was something deeper. It was tradition. It was comfort. It was home. But that Friday night, as I helped Mom clear the table after dinner, she said something that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt before. "You better be quick tomorrow," she said casually as she dried the last plate. "Someone might rent it before you do." I froze, holding the dish towel in my hand, staring at the sink like it had suddenly swallowed my future. I hadn't considered that possibility. Until now, the movie had always been there, waiting patiently for me on the shelf. My ritual had become so familiar, so safe, that the idea of interruption seemed unthinkable. But her words landed like a pebble in a still pond, rippling outward until the water was no longer calm. I didn't say anything at first. I just nodded and pretended like it didn't bother me. But that night, as I lay in bed, my mind was spinning. What if someone got there first? What if a new kid in the neighborhood had discovered it? What if it wasn't waiting for me this time? The VHS wasn't just a tape to me. It was a part of my week, stitched into the rhythm of my days like cereal in the morning or brushing my teeth before bed. I imagined walking into the store, rushing to the shelf, only to see the empty spot where it usually waited. I imagined someone else, someone I didn't know, holding the tape in their hands, smiling as they carried it to the counter. That image felt strangely personal, like a friend being taken away. Saturday morning came with golden light and the faint hum of cartoons in the living room. I could hear the sounds of recess or Doug in the background as I got dressed faster than usual, barely tasting my toast. My backpack, the one I used only for sleepovers or movie nights, already had my notebook, my sketch of the movie's logo, and my pouch of markers. I even packed the half-full pack of bubble tape I'd been saving. Everything had to be perfect. I stood by the front door with my jacket on before Mom even had her keys in hand. She smiled, knowingly, as she sipped her coffee and took her time. The clock on the microwave blinked 10:03, and every minute felt like it was slipping away from me. I watched the digital numbers with growing worry. What if someone had gone right when the store opened? When we finally got in the car, I pressed my forehead against the cold window, staring out as we drove past the leaf-covered sidewalks and rows of mailbox posts. It was autumn and the colors were changing, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were filled with anxiety and silent hope, the kind of quiet pleading only a child can understand. Not prayers, exactly, just whispered thoughts into the world. We pulled into the lot, and there it was, Raymond's Video and Games. The windows were decorated with faded Halloween decals, and a cardboard cutout of Casper stood near the door, smiling in his usual ghostly way. I rushed out before Mom had even taken the keys out of the ignition. The familiar jingle of the doorbell greeted me like an old friend as I stepped into the cool, dim light of the store. I didn't walk, I ran. Past the new releases wall. Past the rows of action and comedy. I turned the corner toward the kids section, heart pounding louder than my footsteps. And then I saw it. The shelf was there, just as it always had been. The spot where the tape usually sat was empty. My stomach dropped. I stood frozen, blinking at the gap between the plastic cases. The edges of other movies framed the space like they were mocking me. Homeward Bound. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. The Brave Little Toaster. All great, but none of them what I came for. I looked around wildly. Maybe it had been misplaced. Maybe it had just been moved. I crouched down to check the lower shelves, eyes scanning every label, every colorful spine, hoping for a miracle. My hands shook a little as I pulled one tape out after another, not really reading them, just hoping the one I loved would suddenly appear. Then I heard it, the familiar whir of the tape rewinder from behind the counter. I turned toward Mr. Raymond's desk. He stood there, winding a tape with a worn cloth in his hand, humming some tune I didn't recognize. Behind him, in a little stack of returns yet to be shelved, I saw it. The cover. The movie. I ran up to the counter, not even trying to play it cool. "Is that one ready?" I asked, pointing like it was treasure. He looked up, eyes amused behind his thick glasses, and nodded. "Just got returned this morning. Almost didn't make it, kiddo." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He handed it to me, and I clutched it like it might disappear. It was here. It was safe. And it was mine, at least for the weekend. Mom called from the aisle, reminding me to pick a snack. I walked back to her, tape in hand, smiling wider than I had in days. I picked out a pack of Gushers and a bottle of clearly Canadian, just like last time. The ritual was back on track. The fear had passed, but I'd never forget it. The feeling that something precious might not wait forever. That even our favorite things can be fragile. That night, when I pressed play and the tape crackled into motion, it felt even more special. Like I had earned it. Like I had fought for it. And maybe that made it even better. The way the colors flickered across the screen, the way the music filled the room, the way my heart felt full again. It all meant a little more now. Because this time, I knew what it meant to almost lose it. Every week began with the same quiet mission. A kind of secret ritual only I knew about. It wasn't just about waiting until Saturday. It was about earning it, piece by piece, coin by coin. My pencil case, the one that once held pencils and erasers and the occasional paperclip, had taken on a new role. Now it guarded treasure. I would slip it into my backpack like any other school day, but I knew what was really inside. Quarters, dimes, the occasional nickel, all collected carefully throughout the week. Loose change from the corner bakery when Mom let me buy a chocolate-covered donut. a coin or two left over from lunch money if I skipped the chocolate milk. Even Grandpa once handed me a warm, faded penny from 1979, telling me to keep it safe. And I did. All of them went into the pencil case, tucked away in a soft corner between the fabric walls that muffled their jingles. On the outside, I looked like any other kid, taking notes in class, pretending to focus during math problems on the overhead projector. But inside, I was a young accountant, quietly tallying my tiny fortune beneath the lid of my desk, visualizing exactly how close I was getting to that sweet silver dollar goal. The rental fee was simple, but to a child, it might as well have been gold. $1.75. I knew it by heart. I remember once sitting in the back of class while the teacher explained long division, but my mind wasn't on numbers. Not those numbers, anyway. I was thinking of the coin I'd find under the couch cushion that afternoon. I was sure of it. Dad always left spare change behind after watching TV. It was a calculated guess and a hopeful one. There was something beautiful about that slow build-up. It taught me patience. It made the wait feel earned. I wasn't just handed a weekend movie, I worked for it, in my own small way. And by Friday afternoon, that pencil case would be full enough to make my heart race. After school, I'd zip it open slowly, alone in my room, the scent of notebook paper and bubble gum lingering in the air. I'd lay the coins out on my bedspread, one by one, in neat little rows. Sometimes I'd count them twice, even 3 times, just to be sure. And there it was, $1.75, or if I was lucky, $2. Enough for the VHS and maybe even a bag of mini pretzels. I felt proud in those moments, like I had done something grown up, like I had found a way to hold on to the magic just a little bit longer. Even now, I sometimes wonder, how could something as simple as a handful of coins feel so important? But back then, those coins were more than money. They were keys. Keys to another world. To a story I knew by heart but still wanted to live again and again. And when I finally zipped that pencil case shut, the soft click of the zipper felt like the final note of a lullaby I didn't want to end. There was something almost sacred about that walk. The path from our small brick house to the video store just 4 blocks down felt longer on Saturday afternoons. Not because of the distance, it was a 10-minute walk at most, but because of the anticipation, the sense that I was headed somewhere important, somewhere magical. Every step felt like part of a ritual. My shoes hitting the pavement with that steady rhythm, the pencil case tucked carefully inside my jacket pocket, heavy with coins I had counted more than once the night before. The sky always seemed a little brighter on those days, the breeze softer, carrying the faint smell of someone mowing their lawn or barbecuing nearby. I'd pass the same houses, the same fences, the same cracked sidewalk squares, but on Saturdays, everything looked different. More alive. I still remember the sound of my feet on the gravel where the sidewalk ended near the corner lot. Crunch, crunch, and how I'd pause briefly to glance toward the little strip mall where the video store sat, sandwiched between the laundromat and the tiny pizza place that always had a neon sign buzzing in the window. That sign said open, but it always felt like it was saying welcome, just for me. There was a point in the walk where the excitement would almost turn into nerves. Usually around the old elm tree, the one with the broken branch that bent like a crooked arm over the street. I'd pass under it and suddenly feel my chest tighten just a little. What if someone got there first? What if the tape wasn't on the shelf this time? That moment of uncertainty always made the last stretch feel longer than the rest. Mom would walk beside me sometimes, talking about dinner or asking what part of the movie I liked most. I'd answer with as few words as possible, not out of rudeness, but because my mind was already halfway inside the store, already standing in front of the new releases section, eyes scanning for the familiar white spine with the bold black letters. But walking alone, that was its own kind of magic. On those days, I imagined the journey like a movie scene. I was the character, and this was my big moment. The music would be swelling right about now if life had a soundtrack. I'd pretend I was on a quest, like the hero of the movie I loved so much. Each block conquered brought me closer to the prize, the reward waiting behind that glass door and the faint smell of plastic cases and popcorn oil. Crossing the final street always gave me a jolt of adrenaline. I could see the colorful posters in the window from there. Cartoons, action films, comedies with goofy faces frozen mid-laugh. And then the logo, in big red and yellow bubble letters, slightly faded by the sun but still beaming like a beacon. The name of the store, one I still remember to this day, even though the building has long since turned into a vape shop. Galaxy Video. The bell above the door gave a little ring when it opened, a sound that now lives somewhere deep in my memory, tied forever to joy. The cool air inside would hit my face, a little blast of air-conditioned heaven after the walk. It smelled like plastic cases, warm wires, and a faint sweetness that always reminded me of candy I didn't know the name of. But none of that mattered once I stepped inside. Because the journey that had started with counting coins and daydreaming through spelling tests, was finally over. I was here, and maybe, just maybe, the tape would still be waiting. I wish I could explain what it felt like, that one breathless moment standing before the shelf. Maybe time really did slow down. Or maybe it was just my heartbeat that sped up so fast that everything else around me seemed to freeze. The colors of the VHS covers, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the muffled sounds of another family talking by the candy rack, they all blurred into the background. There I was again, right in front of the new releases section, that sacred spot on the left wall of Galaxy Video, just past the spinning rack of clearance tapes and next to the gumball machine that never worked properly. The shelves were tall for someone my size. I'd tilt my head slightly, scanning from left to right, eye level first, then one shelf above, and finally crouching to check the bottom row. Always in that order. Always with the same hope. Each title my eyes landed on was a step closer to either joy or disappointment. Some movies I already recognized instantly, having passed them week after week. Others were new arrivals, boasting shiny covers with stickers that read just IN or limited copies. But my eyes were trained for something specific, the exact shade of blue on the spine, the bold title in blocky white letters, the tiny logo of the studio at the bottom right corner that my fingers already knew by heart. My favorite this. I don't even remember the name now without effort. Maybe because back then, the movie wasn't just a title. It was a whole world. A feeling. That sense of excitement when the familiar music started, when the opening scene faded in and I was pulled into an adventure that felt both timeless and mine alone. But before I could feel all that again, I had to find it. I remember the particular fear that came with not seeing it right away. I'd blink once, twice. I'd slow down. I'd run my fingers lightly across the rows, gently sliding each case just far enough out to read the label. Not this one, not that one. My lips moved silently as I mouthed the names. And still, no sign. There were moments I thought my heart might stop. Maybe someone else had gotten it. Maybe I was too late this time. I'd picture another kid standing in their living room, already pressing play, already laughing at the part one loved most. That feeling of loss was heavy even before it was real. It hovered just behind my excitement, ready to crush it if the shelf remained empty. I'd glance back toward the counter, hoping by some miracle that it had just been returned. Sometimes I'd even peek at the drop slot near the entrance, wondering if maybe, just maybe, the tape had been slipped in minutes ago and hadn't yet made its way back to the shelf. I always gave it one more pass. One last sweep of the eyes, slower this time, as if the movie might be hiding, playing a trick on me, waiting to jump out at the right moment. And then there was, tucked between two action movies with exploding cars on the covers, its familiar spine shining under the buzzing ceiling light. My breath would catch in my throat. A rush of warmth would rise in my chest. Relief, joy, victory, all wrapped into one simple second. I'd reach out slowly as if touching a treasure, fingers brushing the edge of the case. It was still there. No one else had taken it. The world hadn't changed too much since last Saturday. For one more week, everything was just as it should be. I'd pull the tape off the shelf, holding it with both hands like it was made of glass. I'd flip it over, read the summary again even though I knew it by heart. Sometimes, I'd even whisper a soft yes under my breath, a little celebration only I could hear. And that was the moment I had waited for all week. The slow motion search, the racing heart, the quiet victory. It didn't matter how many times I rented it. That feeling never got old. Never once. There are moments in childhood that settle into your memory like golden light on an old photograph. Soft, warm, eternal. For me, it was always that exact second, standing in the quiet of the video store, holding the tape in my hands. It was still there. No one had taken it. And the feeling that followed was unlike anything else. It's funny how something so small could carry so much joy. The weight of the VHS in my hands, the cool plastic against my palms, the slightly scuffed edges of the cardboard sleeve, they were as comforting as a hug. It wasn't just about watching a movie. It was about knowing that the little plan I had carried all week in my heart had worked. It was a quiet kind of triumph, the kind only kids understand, the kind adults forget until a memory sneaks up and taps them on the shoulder. I remember smiling to myself as if I had just discovered treasure, because in a way I had. After all the waiting, the daydreams at school, the counting of coins, and that walk that felt like a journey, I had arrived here, and the movie was mine again, at least for a little while. I didn't even need anyone to see me holding it. The happiness wasn't about showing it off. It was something deeper, more personal. It was the relief of knowing I hadn't lost my chance. The comfort of routine. The satisfaction of holding a familiar story in my hands again, ready to press play on scenes I already knew but never got tired of. I'd hold it close as I walked to the counter, sometimes even giving it a little pat like I was reassuring it that we'd be home soon. The clerk would usually smile, a kind man with glasses and a voice that always sounded like he had just woken up from a nap. He didn't ask questions anymore. He knew this was my movie. The fourth time renting it in a row didn't faze him. He'd scan the barcode with that soft beep, slap a little return date sticker on the back, and slide it across the counter to me like he was passing a gift. I remember tucking the tape into a plastic Galaxy video bag, the kind that made that crinkly sound when you held it too tight. The handles would stretch in my fingers as I walked home, the weight of it swinging gently at my side. I didn't rush. I wanted to savor the feeling for as long as I could. There was a magic in knowing exactly what was waiting for me later that evening. I could already picture the glow of the TV screen, the hum of the VCR, the little blue light that blinked when the tape was ready to play. I knew the opening scene would hit just right. I knew the lines that made me laugh, the parts where I always leaned forward, even though I knew what was coming. But more than the movie, it was the feeling that everything was in place. The tape was in my hands. The night was ahead of me. And for a little while, the world was exactly how I needed it to be. It's strange how powerful that feeling was. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream. It whispered. It whispered peace. It whispered routine and reward and safety. It whispered, "You made it. This moment is yours." And I believed it. Even now, all these years later, I can still feel the joy that bloomed in my chest as I walked out of the video store, plastic bag in hand, heart full, face warm from smiling. No prize, no trophy, no badge of honor could compare to that quiet satisfaction. Because that tape, that worn little VHS with its familiar title, was everything I needed. There was a quiet magic in the way I sat down that evening, as if the rest of the world had gently faded into the background. The lights in the living room were dim, just the little lamp by the couch casting a soft yellow glow on the carpet. I had my spot, always the same, nestled into the couch cushion with a pillow hugged tight to my chest, a bowl of popcorn balanced on the armrest, and the VCR humming patiently in front of me, waiting to come alive. I knew every step of the ritual, and that made it special. Pull the tape from its case, that gentle crackling of cardboard opening. Slide it into the VCR with a satisfying click, then press the rectangular play button. A tiny blue light flickered, and a faint static hum filled the room as the screen shifted from black to blue to the fuzzy lines of the opening seconds. My heart always fluttered then, as if I were seeing it all for the first time. But I wasn't. I'd seen it before. This was the fourth weekend in a row. And yet it didn't matter. That feeling of watching it again, of sinking into familiar dialogue, favorite scenes, and comforting music, was like coming home to a place that always waited for me. I knew what the characters would say. I knew what would happen, but somehow it felt new every time. There was a kind of joy that came from knowing the rhythm of the story, from anticipating a line just before it was said, from mouthing it quietly under my breath like a secret only I understood. I'd catch myself smiling before the funny part even began, because I remembered how it made me laugh last time. And sure enough, I laughed again. Same spot, same joke, same wide grin. The best moments weren't even the big scenes. They were the little ones. The way a character tilted their head when they were confused, or a song that played softly in the background that made the scene feel warm. There was one line, I remember, that always gave me goosebumps. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just a quiet sentence that landed right in my chest. Every time I heard it, I nodded like the movie and I shared a knowing look. I didn't get tired of it. Not even close. If anything, watching it again made me love it more. It became part of me, a rhythm in my week, a reminder that even though everything else in the world felt big and unpredictable, this one thing, this tape, this story, this hour and a half of joy stayed exactly the same. Sometimes, my parents would pass by the room and glance at the screen. "That movie again?" my mom would say, her voice teasing. "Yep," I'd reply with a smile, not taking my eyes off the screen. She never made me feel bad about it. She understood in her own quiet way. She knew the comfort that came from watching something over and over again, from feeling the safety of repetition. And she let me have that space. That moment, that night, I'd sit there, completely still except for my fingers dipping into the popcorn, my eyes tracing the story I knew so well. It wasn't about being surprised anymore. It was about returning to something that made me feel whole. Something that never changed in a world that changed all the time. And as the credits rolled, the soft instrumental theme echoing from the television speakers, I'd feel this quiet peace wash over me. I'd sit for a few extra minutes, even after the screen turned black, just holding on to that calm. I'd rewind the tape gently, always, and place it back in its case like it was something sacred. It never mattered how many times I watched it. The joy was always the same. That feeling of being with something familiar, of letting it wrap around me like a blanket, never lost its magic. I didn't have the words back then, but looking back now, I understand. I wasn't just watching a movie. I was building a memory. I was carving a little safe space in the chaos of growing up. A space filled with laughter, popcorn, soft pillows, and the quiet hum of a VC. A space that asked nothing of me except to sit and be happy. And so I watched it again, and again, and again, and I never got tired. It always started the same way, usually on a quiet Sunday evening when the weekend felt like it had slipped through my fingers far too fast. I'd be rewinding the tape one last time before slipping it back into the plastic case, careful with the edges, always careful, and placing it on the coffee table like a little trophy. The house would be dim, filled with that end-of-weekend silence that almost hummed in the walls. And just as I'd let out a contented sigh, Mom would look at me from across the room with a gentle smile and say those fateful words, "You should try a new one next time." She didn't say it harshly, never in a way that felt like pressure. It was more like a soft nudge, like when someone taps your shoulder and points at something you hadn't noticed. A suggestion, not a command. But to me, at that age, those words stirred something complicated. I remember just nodding slightly the first time she said it, pretending I didn't really hear it. But I did. Of course I did. It sat in my chest all week long, quietly poking at the edges of my certainty. Should I? Should I try something else? I loved that movie. I didn't just like it, I loved it. It was mine. It had become more than a movie. It was the music that meant home. The voices that comforted me. The rhythm of my weekend. Letting go of it, even just for a Saturday, felt like giving up a piece of my own story. What if I didn't like the new one? What if it didn't make me laugh at the same parts or feel warm in the same scenes? What if I regretted it? But Mom wasn't wrong. I could hear it in the way she said it. There were hundreds of tapes on those shelves, lined up in rows like tiny doors waiting to be opened. Adventure, mystery, laughter I hadn't heard yet. She wanted me to discover something new, to step just a little outside of the circle I had drawn around myself. Still, All week long, I carried the quiet conflict like a folded note in my pocket. At school, while I doodled in the margins of my notebook, I found myself staring at the faces of other movie covers in my mind. Ones I'd seen 100 times but never picked. The one with the boy and the dragon. The one with the group of kids on bikes. The one with the glowing green lettering that looked just a little bit scary, but not too scary. What if, just maybe, there was another movie I could love just as much? And yet, every Saturday morning came around, and my hands instinctively went to my pencil case full of coins. The same path to the video store, the same aisle, the same slow scan of the shelf. My heart would leap when my movie was still there, and like muscle memory, I'd reach for it, comfort winning over curiosity again and again. Mom never pushed. She just smiled when I returned with the same tape. "That one again, huh?" she'd say. I'd nod, suddenly unsure if I was being brave by choosing what I loved or afraid by not choosing something new. Maybe it was both. Maybe love and fear were two sides of the same coin when you're a kid holding on to something that feels like yours in a world that's always shifting. But what I realize now, all these years later, is that Mom wasn't trying to take anything away from me. She was planting a tiny seed, a thought, an invitation to wonder. And over time, that seed would grow gently, until one day I'd stand in that same aisle, staring at that same row of tapes, and let my hand linger just a little longer over a different one. Not yet. Not today. But one day. For now, I return to my favorite story like a friend you never grow tired of seeing. And Mom let me. Because sometimes, especially when you're small and the world feels too big, loving one thing deeply is more than enough. And so I watched it again, and Mom smiled. There's a quiet kind of magic in those moments we don't realize are final until long after they've passed. The last time I rented that VHS tape, my favorite one, the one I had waited all week to borrow for the fourth, maybe fifth time, I didn't know it would be the last. At the time, it felt just like any other Saturday, wrapped in the warm routine that had carried me through countless weekends. I was just a kid, clutching my coins, walking the familiar path to the video store with that same eager heart. The video store itself still had its old, comforting scent, a mix of plastic, paper, and the faintest hint of popcorn from the corner snack bar where Mrs. Jensen always gave out free gum to the regulars. The shelves stood tall, proud, packed with stories waiting to be shared. I scanned the rows for my movie, fingers trembling slightly, heart pounding the familiar rhythm of hope and relief when the familiar cover stared back at me. There was still waiting for me, just like always. I remember clutching the tape in my hands as if it was the most precious thing in the world. The plastic case felt cool, smooth, and heavier than I expected, as if it held the weight of every memory I'd made with that film. The walk back home felt slower, more deliberate, like I was carrying something sacred. That night, as I watched it again, laughing at the same jokes, whispering along with the lines I knew by heart, I felt an indescribable comfort. I didn't realize then that the simple joy of rewatching that movie would soon become a quiet echo of the past. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. The video store changed hands, the bright neon sign flickered less often, and new movies appeared that I wasn't quite ready to explore. The rituals of Saturday VHS rentals started to slip away, slowly, like leaves drifting down a stream. I was growing older in small, almost invisible ways. No longer was it just about that one beloved tape. Now there were friends to see, schoolwork to do, and new interests pulling me in different directions. The magic of waiting all week, the thrill of that simple Saturday journey, started to fade into the background noise of growing up. Sometimes, I wonder if the movie knew it was the last time I'd rent it. Did it sense that it was the closing chapter of a beautiful, innocent ritual? Or did it simply exist, patient and unchanged, waiting quietly for a hand that would not reach for it again? That's the bittersweet truth about childhood, isn't it? You live it fully, not knowing when the final page will be turned. You don't see the end coming until you look back, and suddenly, it feels like a story written in soft golden light, something to hold on to when the world outside feels different. I still have that tape somewhere, tucked away in a box, its cover worn but intact. Sometimes, when the noise of the present grows too loud, I pull it out, hold it in my hands, and remember those Saturdays when the world was simple and waiting all week felt like the greatest adventure of all. The VHS may no longer play, the video stores may be gone, and the Saturday ritual may have ended long ago. But the memories? They are timeless. And for that, I am endlessly grateful.